Welcome to another edition of Up Close and Personal. From the pages of the National Post and Maclean's magazine to the top editorial position within Village Media, today we sit down and talk with our new editor-in-chief, Michael Friscolanti. Frisco, it's great to have you on the team and certainly great to have you here on Up Close and Personal.
Thanks, Scott. It's long overdue. I appreciate you having me.
Now, you've had a very impressive career, and we're going to talk about that. But let's start in Hamilton, where you were valedictorian at Bishop Ryan back in 1994. See, we do our homework on these shows.
Yeah.
And then went on to Lakehead and Ryerson. Did you always know, Frisco, that journalism in one form or another would be your career path?
No, I really didn't. I think the beautiful thing, like so many journalists, we kind of hit the bug when we got to university. The campus newspaper at Lakehead, the Argus, was where I first was a news editor there and really got the bug for journalism, that need to tell stories and tell people what was going on. And I just loved it. I mean, I don't think I went to many classes. I was working there. And fortunately, Ryerson had a post-grad program, a 2-year program for graduates. So if you had a few clips, which I did in the campus paper, you could get in there. And same thing, when I got there, I worked with some unbelievable journalists at the Eye Opener, the independent campus newspaper at Ryerson, still friends of mine and just fantastic journalists who are now working all over the place doing amazing things. I learned a ton there, and from there, I caught some breaks, and it was really great after that.
Now, was it your work at the Eye Opener that really kind of prepared you for the next step to get into what we would call the real world of journalism and working for a living in that industry?
I think so. I mean, it feels like 100 years ago, but I was really surrounded by a lot of people that were really keen, a lot of young reporters who were really keen to get in the business. And we were being mentored by people who were already in the business and taught us a lot of things. And fortunately, it was those kind of relationships that help you land your first good internship and things like that. And kind of went on from there. But yeah, I look back and I would never be where I am now if I didn't have that.
Now, your resume, and it's an impressive one, includes, among other things, the National Post, Maclean's magazine, 2 widely recognized publications, yet you were drawn to this opportunity here at Village Media, a company that prides itself on being hyper-local and strengthening the communities that we serve. Maybe you could speak to that a bit.
For sure. I mean, I think it's a real different opportunity, and that's what really struck me about it. I've been very fortunate to work at those publications, like you mentioned. I worked with some amazing editors at the National Post and some fantastic editors at Maclean's magazine, really people that have just helped me immensely in my career. But there was something I always thought I would like to try, local news, and be involved in a local news company. And, Village is in my hometown where I live, and it was a great opportunity, and a friend of a friend introduced me to Jeff, the CEO. And it was one of those things where it just seemed like the right fit, and I'm really glad that I came. It's been amazing so far.
Now, I know it's only been a few months, but what are some of the biggest differences that you've noticed from those big conglomerates to something like Village Media that is much more of a niche?
Well, I think there's so many different things, but I think what people have to understand with local news is you are responsible for that community that you live in. You answer to them, you hold people to account in those communities, and to be honest, you know the people in those communities. You know a lot of the people you're covering, or your friends know those people you're covering. Whereas sometimes when you're working at a larger place like the Post or Maclean's, you're going into communities to tell a story where you know nobody there and you've never met anybody there. And so there's a different kind of accountability. You're still accountable, obviously, in the big operations, but when you are telling a story about your mayor, and you know that mayor knows who you are, and you know the community, and they know people who live in that community, there's a real sense of relationship there. Like, you really have to make sure that you're doing it properly and with all the integrity you can, because you're going to run into these people at the shopping mall. You're going to see them around the corner, and that's really a huge difference.
Is it harder in that kind of an environment versus, I don't want to say hiding behind a Maclean's curtain or a National Post curtain, but you know what I mean, because it is so much more intimate?
I don't know if it's harder or not. I don't want to say that, but I would definitely say, to be honest, it's more important in so many ways. Local journalism is the most important kind of journalism because you're telling the stories of your neighborhoods, your streets, the people in your communities, and it's where you live. And ultimately, you do care a lot about what's going on where you live. And so I really think the responsibility is a different level of responsibility. Again, I don't want to say that what people are doing at larger organizations is not important and you don't have a huge responsibility, because you do. But like I said, you are covering your local sports teams, you're covering your city council, but you live there too. It's the same. It's a very intimate relationship, a very deep relationship.
Some of the topics that you've covered over your career, and I want to refer to my notes so that I don't miss it because it's an impressive list: the opioid crisis, Syrian refugees, climate change, the double murder of Barry and Honey Sherman, from presidents to prime ministers. Frisco, your words have told the stories of the best and the worst, and we've seen it all through your lens. Is there a story that sticks out to you or one that has impacted you the most in your career?
Yeah, there's so many. I think the fortunate thing about working at a place like Maclean's is you have that ability to dive deep into something, to dive deep into an issue. You talk about the opioid crisis. The last story I wrote for Maclean's, which was published in the summer, was trying to tell the story of one particular week in this opioid crisis, one of the deadliest weeks we've seen throughout the whole thing. And so there was a lot of different levels of reporting that went into that. I was crunching numbers and getting stats from all the different provinces to try to put together some periods of time where we had more deaths than usual. And once I pinpointed sort of a week to focus on, then the task became reaching out to dozens and dozens of families who lost loved ones to the crisis all across the country, asking them if they would speak to me, explaining the story I'm working on. And the end result I'm very proud of because it sort of takes the readers beyond the headlines they've read and into 1 week of a crisis that is going on every day. And you get to meet the people who lost their lives and the people who loved them. And really it's to show people why we should care about this issue, right? It's not, we see the headlines all the time, but this story goes a little bit deeper. That's one I'm very proud of.
And it's such a devastating story and a crisis that certainly goes from coast to coast. When you're talking to these families who have lost loved ones, how do you not let it affect you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I have to say that I think that's what I've done the most in my career. I feel like I'm always on the doorstep of death and destruction. And I've spoken to so many families who've lost loved ones over the years for different things. And I really think it's just about being compassionate and understanding that it's a privilege to be able to tell their story, to be able to ask them to speak to you about whatever that issue is you're working on, whether their loved one died from opioids or whether they were, in some cases murdered by somebody that you're covering, or in a car crash or any of those things. You're asking them to share their story and to tell them about that loved one. And so there's a real responsibility that comes with that. So yeah, I think it's, you do kind of have to put up a wall and not let it affect you too much. But I think the key is to understand that if you understand there's a huge responsibility that goes with it, it's much easier to deal with.
And I would think that there's a significant element of trust that goes with that relationship with people that you're working with and interviewing.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing with journalism is we have to have trust because that's all we have. I often tell people that when I'm talking to them for a story that my word is all I can give you. That I'm going to report what you say honestly, that I'm going to be fair and accurate in my reporting, and that I'm going to tell the story truthfully. And that's really, what else can I give them besides my word on that? And you ultimately know that they're going to read that story, and you have to know that they're going to question something if it's not accurate. And so that's kind of where that trust comes in, right? And I think because I was fortunate enough to do it for a long time, you can show them past things you've done and say, well, here's some other pieces I did that show that I can do that.
Let's talk briefly about your role here at Village. I know the title is editor-in-chief, but I also know that you're not a title guy. You're more of a roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty. But maybe if you could explain the role and what it means to someone who otherwise isn't familiar with editor-in-chief.
Yeah, it's fascinating because there hasn't been an editor-in-chief here before. I'm the first one, and there's some amazing editors already in place here across our sites and here at the headquarters. And so I think it's been the first few months have been really carving out what I should be doing and how I can help, because the last thing they need is for me to go in and micromanage what they're doing. But I definitely want to be involved in the journalism that we're doing here because that's what I love. That's what I'm here to do, is to help tell great stories and dig up those stories. And so I think my goal is really to be someone to bounce ideas off of. That's my most important thing, is what story ideas do we have in the can? What are we working on? What's the stories that we need to be telling that people are talking about or that they should be talking about? So I think that's really my goal. And the other thing that I've really been trying to do is just be in touch with our younger journalists and help mentor them any way I can, just whether it's a piece of advice here or editing a story there. That's really what I love to do. So that's really keen for me.
And I would think that has to be the most rewarding because that was you a number of years ago, and now you're paying it forward and doing it for the younger reporters.
I can't tell you some of the advice that I had from fantastic reporters over the years in my career, and editors as well, that I would be nowhere without them, right? And I don't think I'm in their league, to be honest. I don't think I have the same abilities that they do, but I hope to be able to help somebody. And I think I've slowly been able to do that, so I'm excited about it.
I'd like to ask you a question that I asked Lloyd Robertson on another episode of Up Close recently regarding the state of journalism. And why does it seem like people are losing faith in what we do? There's almost a hatred for journalists. And of course, you don't have to look any further than what transpired in Ottawa recently. What has happened, and is there something that we as the media need to do or can do to fix that fake news narrative?
It's just so many tentacles to that, Scott. I think, we had a president of the United States that was telling people for years and years that the free press was the enemy of the people and that they're fake news. And you say that enough times, people start to believe it. But I think for me, everyone's going to have a different opinion. But for me, I think we need to just keep doing the job the way we know how to do it, which is to find the facts, dig up the truth, speak to the people who we need to speak to, who know the truth about what's happening here, and tell stories properly. And I think that's the best way we can regain that trust. And I don't know if you're ever going to get everybody to be on board with what they think is the truth. There's always going to be that segment of the population that says, well, I can't believe what's being reported here because it's from the mainstream media. It's hard to counter that. But I do think for me, I always wake up and say, well, are we doing our job the right way? Are we filling our pages the way we're supposed to be doing it? And I think if we focus on that mission, then we're going to be okay, especially here at Village.
Yeah, and that's a great segue to my next question. We hang our hat here at Village on providing, credible, strong local journalism. So I guess my question is, why is local journalism so important?
I think local journalism is honestly, like I said earlier, it's the most important journalism because it's helping us navigate our day-to-day lives, right? Yes, it's important what's happening on Parliament Hill in Ottawa, and yes, it's important what's happening around the world, and we need to be aware of those things. But the question is, how is it affecting where I live? How is climate change impacting where I live? How is our efforts at reconciliation happening where I live? How is City Council spending my money? Where are my tax dollars going to? Who are the heroes in my community? Who's doing things that I need to know about because they're important or they're special? And where are we falling down, and where should we be improving, and how should we be telling those stories? I kind of always think of journalism, I certainly didn't make this up, but I've always believed that journalism is, shining that flashlight on things, right? And saying we need to shine it over here in this corner and say what's going on, figure out what's happening. And I really feel in local journalism that notion is so true, because something could be happening in your city, in your community, that unless the journalists there are digging into it and telling you what's happening, no one's going to know. And there'll be maybe a bunch of rumors flying around, a lot of innuendo, but nobody's telling the truth. I think that's our most important job. To be honest, I'd give an example that happened here in Sault Ste. Marie this week or last week. There was a local landlord who was fined $120,000 for various fire code violations. The fire department put out a press release and said, we find somebody, we're not going to tell you who he is or who she is, and we're not going to tell you the address. And everybody just kind of accepted that and moved along. But we said, no, this is an issue of public importance. Let's go to the courthouse. Let's pull the file. Let's see who this landlord is. It's nothing personal against the landlord. It's the idea that in a community, in your hometown, if somebody's fined such an astronomical amount of money for fire code violations, the public has a right to know who that is and where that house is. And so we did that story. And I really feel like that epitomizes what local journalism is and the kind of stories we need to be doing. And I point to that story, but we're doing that all over our chain. It's happening every day on our websites, and I just couldn't be more proud of the stuff we do.
As you should be. Okay, we're starting a new segment here on Up Close and Personal, and this is really about getting to know Frisco, and we're going to do this with all of our guests moving forward. It's called Rapid Fire, a series of random questions, no right or wrong answer, and unfortunately, you don't win anything.
All right.
Are you ready to give
I'm ready, yeah.
All right.
I'll try my best.
Let's start the clock. Question 1, early to bed or early to rise?
Neither.
Really?
Early to bed or early to rise? I'm neither. I'm late to bed and a little bit later to rise.
Peter Mansbridge or Lloyd Robertson?
Oh, we just interviewed Lloyd. I have to say, growing up, I always watched Peter, but I have huge respect for Lloyd, obviously.
Steak or chicken?
Steak.
Good answer. Celebrity crush?
Miguel Cabrera.
And best series you've binge watched lately?
Lately?
Yeah.
The Americans, I have to say. The Americans is one of the best shows ever.
Yeah, it's a good one. All right, and there you go. That is Rapid Fire with Frisco. Thanks for doing that. When most new leaders, Frisco, come into an organization, they'll usually take the first 100 days or so to meet people, get a feel for the organization, and generally figure things out. You're almost at that number now, and I know you touched on it earlier, but maybe you can elaborate a little bit. How's it been going? What have you discovered about Village and certainly the role that you're going to play here moving forward?
Yeah, I think we touched on it. I mean, the thing I've discovered is I think what I knew all along, because I read Village media sites, especially Sioux Today. It's quality stuff. It's great journalism. We're serving our communities really well. So I wasn't surprised at all to realize that we have a lot of talent in the room, and there's a lot of amazing editors and reporters that we have. I think that the big difference for me is learning that this is a digital first company, right? Obviously, I worked at an old school magazine.
Right.
For a long time, we were a weekly. When I left, we were a monthly. So it's a very different. Yes, we had a website, and yes, we put stories on that website, but not to the extent that Village Media is a digital first company and the way we operate. So there's been little things that and some big things that have been a bit of an adjustment period to try to figure out. But I'm the kind of guy that I really just kind of like to lean back and take it all in and really understand things before I start making decisions. And I don't really feel like there's many decisions that I need to make here. It's more being a part of the team and helping just one story at a time do better journalism.
Right. The one thing that we know about our readers is how passionate they are about local journalism. If you had our 2 million plus readers that we have each and every week in a room, what would you tell them that they could expect moving forward, not only from you, but from our sites across the network?
I think I would say that you're going to get what you've always received from our sites and hopefully more in terms of holding power to account in your communities, telling you the wonderful stories about the people who live there and what they're doing. I mean, those are my favorite kind of stories. And I think we have to hopefully we're looking forward to doing some more longer form journalism on our sites too, really some deeper reads on issues that matter, not just to people in that particular community, but to people outside of that community, And so I think we're looking forward to those kind of things. Ultimately, I would say to them that you can always depend when you log on to that site that you're going to get the most dependable, robust, reliable, honest reporting that you can in your community. It's going to tell you what's happening. It's going to help you navigate your life.
And I guess this is probably just as good a time as any to announce that we're going to be launching a new podcast in the coming weeks that you and I will be hosting called Inside the Village, where we feature stories from across the network, talk to the reporters covering them, and of course the newsmakers behind them. I can't wait to get going on that. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think it's going to be great. And it's funny. It's interesting you say that because I think that's one of the things I need to get across too is that it's really going to be another window into what we do. Sometimes we all get really focused on the daily grind of journalism, right, and doing those things. I think hopefully our podcast will be a chance to take a step back and really shine that light I always talk about on different stories that are happening and let people see what amazing work the Village Media chain is doing.
Yeah, it's Inside the Village, set to launch on or about April 20th, and you'll be able to find that across the Village Media Network platform or wherever you get your favorite podcast, as they say. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be fun.
Me too. It's going to be great, Scott.
What also is going to be great is getting to spend every day with you. We're very fortunate to have somebody of your caliber leading the editorial staff, and I can't wait to see what the future holds for you and for us and for Village. It's going to be great, and I appreciate you doing this today.
Amazing. I feel the same way. I'm just very grateful to be surrounded by the team we have, and I'm really excited to work with everybody and keep doing great things.
Michael Friscolanti, otherwise known as Frisco, the editor-in-chief here at Village Media. Thanks for watching today's edition of Up Close and Personal. For Village Media, I'm Scott Sexsmith.